It's the dirty truth nobody wants to talk about. Behind the glamorous red carpet moments, the flawless magazine covers, and the carefully curated Instagram feeds, some of Hollywood's most powerful A-list actresses have battled something that money, fame, and luxury hotels cannot prevent: head lice, the most humiliating parasite that turns millionaires into desperate, paranoid versions of themselves. We're talking about an invasion so common yet so deeply stigmatized that even billionaires would rather suffer in silence than admit it happened. It's the ultimate Hollywood taboo. From first-class cabin nightmares to professional removal experts to paranoid mental health spirals, these 9 glamorous actresses didn't just have a bad hair day. They had full-blown invasions that forced them to confront a reality that money cannot prevent. Today, we're peeling back the curtain on Hollywood's most closely guarded secret. Get ready, because these stories are as cringe-worthy as they are controversial, and they're about to make you look at celebrity culture in a completely different way. Jenny Mollen, the first-class scandal that broke the internet. Let's start with the story that shocked the world and changed the conversation about celebrity accountability forever. In December of 2024, actress and author Jenny Mollen boarded a first-class flight from Los Angeles to New York. This wasn't unusual for someone of her status and means. First class is where celebrities go to relax, to be pampered, to exist in a bubble of luxury and privilege that most of us will never experience. She had paid thousands of dollars for a premium seat on a 5-hour cross-country flight. She was ready to settle in, sip champagne, and arrive on the East Coast refreshed and ready for whatever came next. But then something unthinkable happened. Her travel companion leaned over and whispered words that no one wants to hear. "You have lice. Live lice. Right now." Not suspicions, not assumptions. Live, active, breeding parasites crawling through her hair at 30,000 feet in a luxury cabin surrounded by other wealthy passengers. Here's where the scandal deepens. Mollen didn't just casually acquire this infestation that morning. She had been itching for 2 weeks. 2 full weeks of scratching her scalp, of feeling something wrong, of warning signs that she chose to ignore. She blamed it on perimenopause. She attributed it to stress. She came up with dozens of explanations rather than facing the possibility that she might have contracted head lice, something she probably associated with poor hygiene, with children from underfunded schools, with people who weren't like her. But instead of getting off that flight, instead of informing the airline crew or warning fellow passengers, instead of taking responsibility for a potential public health situation, she documented it. She pulled out her phone and started filming and posting on Instagram in real time. The images showed her sitting in a luxury first-class seat with a plastic bag wrapped around her head like some kind of hazmat situation. She was turning her medical crisis into content, monetizing her mistake, creating a narrative that made her look vulnerable and funny rather than reckless and irresponsible. The backlash was immediate and nuclear. Social media exploded with anger. Twitter users called her a public health hazard, a selfish celebrity who believed the rules didn't apply to her, someone willing to risk the health of strangers for the sake of maintaining her image and generating engagement. People were genuinely upset. And then Mollen did something that made it worse. She clapped back at her critics. She told them that the world was literally on fire, There were actual important things happening in the news cycle, and yet they were obsessing over her lice like it was the most important story of the day. But here's the controversy that nobody addressed. Did she warn the airline? Did she inform the flight crew that she had an active infestation? Did she think about the next passenger who would sit in that exact seat, unaware that it had potentially been contaminated by a celebrity with head lice? Did she consider the responsibility that comes with traveling in shared spaces while infested? The answer, based on all available evidence, is no. Because in Hollywood, your brand matters more than everyone else's health. Your narrative matters more than other people's safety. Your image matters more than basic human decency. Britney Spears, when rumors become weapons. Now let's talk about a story that's darker, more troubling, and that reveals something deeply disturbing about how the media treats vulnerable women in the public eye. Everyone remembers 2007. It's one of the most iconic moments in celebrity history. Britney Spears walks into a salon in Tarzana, California, with scissors in her hand and shaves her own head. She sits in that chair and removes the hair she's been famous for since childhood. It's a shocking image that gets replayed over and over again, analyzed endlessly, turned into the defining moment of her public meltdown. For years, tabloids pushed a very specific narrative to explain this moment. They said that Britney had head lice. They said the infestation was so severe, so unbearable, that she was driven to this desperate act of self-destruction. She was so infested, so disgusting in her own mind, that she took matters into her own hands and destroyed the very thing that made her an icon. It's a story that's been repeated so many times that millions of people believe it to be absolute fact. But here's where the real scandal emerges, and it's much more sinister than a simple case of parasites. The real scandal is not whether the lice were real or false. The real scandal is why the media needed this story to be true in the first place. Because, you see, a woman having a mental health crisis, a woman who's been exploited since she was a child by an industry that has controlled every aspect of her body and her choices, that requires empathy. That requires accountability. That requires society to look in the mirror and ask hard questions about how we've treated this person. But a woman with head lice, that's different. That's gross. That's shameful. That's a punchline. That's something that makes people recoil in disgust. So the media weaponized the rumor. They took a health crisis and transformed it into evidence of her moral failure, her unfitness, her inability to be a proper woman, a proper mother, a proper celebrity. They used parasites as an explanation for pain. They used disgust as a substitute for understanding. For over a decade, millions of people believed that Britney Spears shaved her head because she had lice. It became part of her mythology, part of the story told about one of her most vulnerable moments. When her memoir, The Woman in Me, finally came out and she clarified that the shave was an act of reclamation, a rejection of a system that had controlled every inch of her body, a way of taking back her autonomy, the truth emerged. But the damage had been done. The narrative had already poisoned people's understanding of who she is and what happened to her. That's not just a lice story. That's psychological warfare disguised as tabloid gossip. That's the media using a common health issue to justify the systematic destruction of a woman's reputation and mental health. and nobody, absolutely nobody, has ever held them accountable for it. Heidi Klum, when supermodels lose the battle with parasites. Supermodel, fashion icon, a woman whose entire career depends on being flawless, on representing impossible standards of beauty and hygiene. Heidi Klum is someone who has literally built a multi-million-dollar career on the premise that she is perfect, that she is aspirational, that she represents everything beautiful about being a woman in the entertainment industry. So when she walked onto the Ellen DeGeneres show and casually dropped a bomb that shocked the entire studio audience, it created a moment of genuine cognitive dissonance for everyone watching. She said, "Yeah, I just got over head lice." Not hypothetically. Not as a joke about something that happened to her years ago. Recently. Still fresh enough to talk about. Ellen's face showed visible shock and discomfort. The audience gasped. And suddenly, we weren't talking about Heidi's latest project or her fashion ventures or her accomplishments. We were asking the uncomfortable question that nobody wanted to ask. How did a Victoria's Secret angel, a woman whose entire existence is predicated on flawlessness, end up with head lice? Her explanation was that her entire house had been overrun. The infestation had gotten so severe that she had to hire professional removal experts, people she jokingly referred to as lice fairies, who came to her home and spent hours manually picking through her famous blonde locks. It wasn't a quick fix. It wasn't a one-time treatment. It was a process, a humiliating, time-consuming, expensive process that proved that no amount of money could instantly solve this problem. The situation got so serious that her children's school required a certificate of health before they could return to class. This meant the infestation wasn't just a personal problem. It was significant enough to raise public health concerns at an educational institution. Heidi Klum, supermodel, fashion icon, the woman we see on magazine covers and red carpets, was being treated like a parent whose children had a hygiene problem serious enough to warrant official documentation. But here's what's really interesting about how she handled it. She laughed it off with her signature charm. She made it relatable. She turned a potentially career-damaging revelation into a moment of vulnerability that the public found endearing rather than disgusting. And the audience ate it up. People sympathized with her. People felt bad for her. People forgot to ask the hard questions about how a multimillionaire with access to the best dermatologists and medical professionals in the world couldn't prevent a household infestation. This is genius public relations disguised as authenticity. It's strategic vulnerability. It's admitting to a crisis before someone else can expose it, but doing so in a way that maintains sympathy and relatability. And it worked perfectly. We felt bad for her instead of questioning whether someone with unlimited resources should have been able to handle a basic hygiene issue more quickly and more discreetly. The message she sent was, "I'm vulnerable and real and just like you." The real translation was, "I'm controlling my own narrative before the tabloids can destroy me with it." Jennifer Garner, the George Clooney humiliation. Jennifer Garner is America's sweetheart. She's the girl next door. She's the mom we all want to grab coffee with. She's been in our living rooms as an actress, and she's represented a certain kind of wholesome, relatable celebrity femininity that feels safe and warm. So when she revealed on The Tonight Show that her entire family, including her then-husband Ben Affleck, had dealt with a head lice infestation. It seemed like the perfect relatable story. It seemed harmless. It seemed like the kind of thing that happens to real families, and how wonderful that she's open about it. But the full story that emerged was actually quite different from a simple, relatable tale of parenthood. She admitted that she went to a Hollywood party while still in the middle of treatment. Not after treatment. Not once it was cleared. While actively treating the infestation. She and Ben had slathered their hair in a thick, pungent oil treatment that's used to kill parasites. The smell was intense. She described it as a mixture of sulfur and rosemary, something that would be immediately noticeable to anyone standing close to her. Despite smelling like they were covered in lice medication, despite the fact that they were actively infested, Ben apparently convinced her that they looked fine and should go to the party anyway. So she went. She went to a Hollywood social event at a vulnerable moment, smelling of parasite treatment with an active infestation. And she met George Clooney for the first time that night. As she stood there chatting with one of Hollywood's biggest bachelors, one of the most sought-after men in the industry, she could see him visibly twitching, visibly recoiling as the scent of lice medication wafted toward him. She joked about the incident afterward, saying that it was probably why they weren't invited to Clooney's wedding later on. It's a cute story, right? A funny anecdote about the chaos of motherhood and the embarrassing moments we all face. But let's break down what actually happened here. A woman with an active parasite infestation attended a social event where she was meeting influential people. She prioritized her social status and her image over basic courtesy and consideration for others. She put her appearance and her social calendar above everyone else's comfort and health. And the public response was sympathy. The response was admiration for her honesty. The response was, "Oh, motherhood is so hard, and I love that she's relatable, and this is why she's America's sweetheart." Nobody asked the uncomfortable questions. Nobody questioned why she would prioritize attending a party over waiting until the infestation was completely cleared. Nobody asked about responsibility or consideration or whether going to a social event in that condition was appropriate. Kelly Ripa, the morning TV manipulation. Kelly Ripa built her career on oversharing. She's been on morning television for decades, and her brand is built on the idea of total transparency, of telling her audience everything, of being their friend who tells them all her secrets and all her stories, no matter how personal or how private. So when she revealed that she had battled head lice not once, but twice, that she had dealt with multiple infestations as a mother of 3, it seemed like another classic Kelly Ripa confession, another moment where she's bringing her authentic self to morning television. But the controversy here runs much deeper than just a simple admission of a health issue. She went on air on a national broadcast watched by millions of people every single morning, and she discussed her household's infestation in graphic detail. She described the grueling process of the comb-out, the professional removal experts she had to hire, the exhaustion of dealing with the crisis. And she did all of this while sitting inches away from guest celebrities who were there to promote their movies and their projects and their brands. Meanwhile, these guest stars were visibly uncomfortable. Because here's what Kelly didn't mention, but what was hanging in the air like an invisible elephant in the room. Every time someone sat in that chair across from her, there was an unspoken question that nobody wanted to ask, but everyone was thinking, is this set actually clean? Are we safe sitting here? Has the studio been properly treated and inspected? What Ripa did was weaponize her vulnerability. She took her personal crisis and transformed it into content. She turned her household health crisis into television ratings and engagement and conversation. She forced other celebrities to either play along with the conversation or look heartless by refusing to sympathize with her experience. And it worked brilliantly. Suddenly, other actresses started opening up about their own infestations. The show became a support group for A-list celebrities with parasites. The glamour of morning television was systematically dismantled by the gross out factor of discussing active health crises on live air. But nobody questioned whether this was appropriate. Nobody asked if a morning show should become a venue for discussing household infestations. Nobody wondered if Ripa was being genuinely vulnerable, or if she was performing vulnerability in a way that generated ratings and engagement and brand loyalty. She crossed a line, and because she was funny and relatable about it, because she made it entertaining, we let her. We celebrated her for it. We called her real and honest, when what she was actually doing was making sure that her personal crisis became part of the national conversation in a way she could control. Jason Biggs and Jenny Mollen, the couple's crisis and public blame. After Jenny Mollen's airplane scandal became international news, the full scope of the family's nightmare began to emerge. The infestation wasn't just a personal problem limited to Jenny's scalp. The entire household was infested. Her husband, American Pie star Jason Biggs, had to deal with it as well. According to Jenny's own accounts, he apparently freaked out. He was neurotic about it. He was disturbed by the discovery and the scale of the invasion that had taken over their family home. But here's where the story takes an interesting and somewhat troubling turn. After the scandal broke and the household's private health crisis became very public, Jenny began publicly blaming Jason for missing the signs. She joked about asking him to check her scalp weeks before the flight, and he had apparently given her the all clear. He had told her she didn't have lice, when apparently she did. So a celebrity couple's private medical crisis became a public blame game, played out on social media and in interviews. A husband was publicly shamed for missing lice. A wife weaponized her own vulnerability to avoid taking full responsibility for her own actions. The family's health crisis became entertainment. The Biggs household became a meme, a punchline, a symbol of celebrity carelessness and privilege, and they voluntarily participated in their own humiliation. They allowed their private medical situation to be turned into public spectacle. They let the internet joke about their family as a breeding ground for parasites, and they seemingly didn't stop it. They kept talking about it, kept adding to the narrative, kept making it worse. Nobody asked the important questions. Nobody wondered why it's the husband's responsibility to diagnose parasites on someone else's body. Nobody questioned why a wife would publicly blame her husband for a health issue she herself should have been managing and monitoring. Nobody asked why they were turning their family's health crisis into entertainment in the first place. The situation became a case study in how celebrity couples manage scandal, in how they perform accountability without actually being accountable, and in how they involve their entire family in the spectacle of their own crisis. Courtney, love, when hygiene becomes a weapon against women. This story hits different. This is where the narrative becomes darker, more troubling, and where we begin to see how these stories about lice and infestation are not just funny anecdotes or relatable tales of celebrity mishaps. Sometimes they're weapons used against women who refuse to conform to the industry's standards of perfection. Courtney Love didn't just have lice at some point in her life as a celebrity. According to historical accounts and biographical information, she was labeled as unclean from childhood. Kids at school called her pea girl because her parents neglected to wash her clothes properly. Teachers noted her hygiene issues. Critics and gossip columnists used her appearance and cleanliness as a weapon against her throughout her career. When she entered the entertainment industry, when she became famous as part of the grunge movement, the line between alternative style and actual neglect became blurred. When rumors of household infestations surfaced during her most chaotic and vulnerable periods, they weren't treated as a minor medical issue that could happen to anyone. They were treated as proof of her unfitness. They were evidence that she was dangerous, unstable, unworthy of respect, unworthy of custody, unworthy of the platform and the career she had built. The lice became a symbol of everything that was wrong with her, everything that made her unfit for the standards and expectations that the industry imposed on women. Here's the real scandal, and it's much bigger than head lice. The media didn't just report on her health issues. They used hygiene and cleanliness as a cudgel against a woman who refused to conform to Hollywood's beauty standards. They weaponized her body and her appearance against her in ways they never did for male musicians and male artists. While other celebrities could laugh off their infestations on talk shows and receive sympathy and relatability, Love's lice were evidence of her moral failure. They were proof that she was broken, that she was unfit, that she was unworthy. For decades, the media has used the accusation of uncleanliness against her, the threat of lice and infestation, as a way to explain away her pain, her genius, her talent, her worth. And she paid for it. Her reputation was systematically destroyed, not just by the music industry, but by the public narrative about her body, her hygiene, her fundamental worth as a human being. That's not just health shaming. That's systemic misogyny. It's using a common medical issue that affects millions of people to justify the destruction of a woman's entire career and mental health. Madonna, the Queen's loss of control. Madonna is known throughout her entire career as a control freak. Every single aspect of her image, her music, her career, her public persona has been meticulously controlled and calculated. She's a woman who commands global tours, who builds multi-million-dollar empires, who shapes culture through sheer force of will and vision. So when she lost control to something as small and seemingly insignificant as a household parasite infestation, something broke. She described the experience as one of the most difficult processes she'd ever endured, not just physically in terms of treatment and removal, but psychologically in terms of her sense of control and security. For a woman who has spent her entire life controlling every variable, who has built an empire on the premise that she can will things into existence, the inability to prevent and immediately eliminate a parasite infestation in her own home was deeply traumatic. After the infestation was supposedly cleared, after professional treatment and removal was complete, and she was given the all clear, she didn't immediately return to normal. She became paranoid. She was afraid to lay her head on her children's pillows. She was afraid to trust that the infestation was actually completely gone. She was afraid in her own home. For a woman of her power and status, this loss of security and safety was something she apparently struggled with for quite some time. What's really happening in this story, what the entertainment media glossed over in favor of treating it as a funny anecdote or a relatable moment of celebrity humanity, is psychological trauma. Madonna experiencing a genuine loss of control and security, experiencing paranoia and fear in her own home, experiencing what sounds like symptoms of obsessive-compulsive disorder or post-traumatic stress related to the invasion of her private space. This is not a light story. This is a woman's mental health crisis being turned into entertainment because it involved parasites. The broader picture. What this reveals about Hollywood. When we step back and look at all of these stories together, when we see 9 different women from different generations, different backgrounds, different levels of fame, all dealing with similar infestations, all handling them in different ways, all facing different consequences and different public reactions, we begin to see a much larger pattern emerge, and that pattern reveals something deeply troubling about the entertainment industry, about celebrity culture, about how we treat women in positions of power and visibility. These stories reveal a massive divide between the image of perfection that we demand from our celebrities and the messy, complicated, very human reality of their actual lives. They reveal that no amount of money, no level of fame, no degree of privilege can prevent a common health issue from occurring. But more importantly, they reveal how these health crises are managed, how they're narrated, how they're turned into either sympathetic stories or shameful scandals, depending entirely on who the celebrity is and how she chooses to tell the story. They reveal celebrity privilege in action. A-list celebrities can hide health crises from the public, can control the timing and the narrative of when and how their private struggles become public, and can be rewarded with sympathy and engagement for their honesty and vulnerability. Meanwhile, a regular person dealing with the same health issue faces genuine stigma and real consequences. They might lose their job. They might lose custody of their children. They might be evicted from their housing. The system treats them as a threat to public health. But when a celebrity deals with the same issue, it's a relatable anecdote, a funny talk show story, proof that they're just like us. These stories reveal weaponized vulnerability. Celebrities admit to struggles not necessarily because they're being genuinely vulnerable and honest. They're doing it because it's profitable. It generates content. It builds the relatable brand. It allows them to control the narrative before someone else can expose them and damage their image. It's strategic, it's calculated, and it's incredibly effective at making us feel like we have a genuine connection with these people when what we're actually experiencing is a performance of authenticity. These stories reveal media complicity. Tabloids protect celebrity scandals while amplifying ordinary people's shame. They create narratives that serve the powerful. They laugh along with celebrities when they admit to embarrassing situations, but they destroy regular people for the same things. The power differential is enormous, and the public never sees it clearly. The outro. understanding the real scandal. So the next time you see a celebrity admit to something embarrassing or gross or seemingly vulnerable on a talk show, I want you to pause and ask yourself some hard questions. Is this genuine vulnerability, or is this strategic image management? Are they telling you because they trust you and the public, or because they've calculated that this confession will make you like them more? Are they being real, or are they performing realness in a way that serves their career? Because here's the truth that the entertainment industry doesn't want you to understand clearly. The difference between a celebrity's crisis and a regular person's crisis isn't luck or relatability or shared humanity. It's power. It's the power to control the narrative. It's the power to monetize your shame. It's the power to turn your struggle into a brand moment. It's the power to admit to a health crisis and have it make you more likable instead of less employable. From Jenny Mollen's first-class scandal to Britney Spears' weaponized rumor to Courtney Love's systematic destruction to Madonna's psychological trauma, this story isn't really about lice. It's about power. It's about who gets to be human and who doesn't. It's about whose vulnerability is celebrated and whose is pathologized. It's about how the entertainment industry creates and maintains impossible standards of perfection while simultaneously refusing to hold itself accountable when those standards are revealed to be, well, impossible. So the next time you scroll past a celebrity's vulnerable confession, when you see them on a talk show admitting to something embarrassing, remember that you're not necessarily witnessing authenticity. You're witnessing a carefully constructed performance. You're seeing a moment that's been calculated and planned to generate a specific response from you. You're participating in a system that rewards celebrities for their performances of vulnerability while punishing regular people for their actual struggles. The real scandal is that we've trained ourselves to confuse performance with authenticity. We've convinced ourselves that when a famous person admits to a problem, it's the same as genuine honesty and connection. We've forgotten to ask who benefits from this narrative. We've stopped questioning who's in control. We've accepted a system where the powerful get to choose when and how to be vulnerable, while the powerless have no choice at all. That's what this is really about. Thanks for watching.